Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Radikal Technologies Accelerator and give you just a basic overview of some of the features. What I was playing for you was just a sequence that you can hear here. Let me turn that back up. Oops. There we go. And it is a polyphonic sequence. That's pretty easy to make. I can show you. You can press the step modify, and that will show you where the steps are being triggered, which steps are being triggered, and you have the sequencer line that goes up to 32 steps, and you can easily go between the different number of steps. So right now I'm just in 1 through 8, and I also had an arpeggiator going. So that, sorry, you can't actually see it on the camera. Maybe I will move that over so you can. Perfect. Okay. So that's right here. And I had just turned the arpeggiator on, and this is what it sounds like on its own. So you can actually have both a sequenced, or you can have the sequencer going and the arpeggiator going, which is a pretty neat feature. Having a polyphonic, and then I had a monophonic arpeggiated sequence. So let me first start by initializing the patch. And this is what you're typically left with when you start. Now you can go and look at what your waveform is. You have to push the page button, and you can see it's a triangle wave. So let's go through some of the different waveforms. Now, one of the nice things about the accelerator, this is a feature that the Spectralis has as well, is that the waveforms are can be modulated in real time, so you don't just have static waveforms. You can go through the waveforms that way. Another thing that's pretty neat is that you have what's called TLM, time linearity modulation, I believe, which is basically like pulse width modulation for all waveforms. So you can hear that here with a sine wave. And then you can go to a triangle wave. Then a sawtooth. And then a square wave. Okay. So you heard the saw wave by itself, but let's just go through how these sound at lower octaves and up to the highest octave. That's about the highest it goes. Let's go to triangle wave. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. And then to a square wave. Whoops. Okay. So on the accelerator, you have actually 3 oscillators that you can use at a time. and that's in this top section here. And getting through the matrix section, it's pretty simple. You have the oscillator section, the filters, the amplifier envelopes, LFOs, and then user selection. So you can kind of create your own template for what you want these 8 encoders to function for. So let's add a second oscillator. So what you can do is you'd go from oscillator 1 to 2, and by just pressing the button, and they're labeled for you. And we can turn oscillator 2 up. So you can't really hear it because the waveform itself, if you look, is a sine wave. So now we have 2 oscillators at the same pitch or frequency. And I don't really like being in that page view. It's a lot easier to see all the different parameters, and you can highlight the different parameters for that oscillator here. So let's see. Let's change just the fine tuning a little bit on VCO2 and see how that sounds. And that's just messing with the fine tuning for oscillator 2. We can probably even go further. Alright, let's turn that back down. And you have a frequency offset too. And really that just says that adjusts the pitch of the VCO in hertz. So this is claimed by Radikal Technologies as a linear detune. Allows for pitch independent frequency beating. I'm thinking that in basic terms is just more finely tuning than the fine tune knob itself. So okay, so let's just stick with that. We can add a third oscillator too. And let's change its waveform to a sawtooth. Alright, I'm going to turn that back down. So let's listen a little bit to the filters now. We just have oscillator 1 and 2, saw, wave. Okay, so I just pressed the VCF button, and we have 2 filters. You can have them either in serial or parallel, and you have multiple types that you can use. You've got low pass, 12 dB, 24, you have the band pass, high pass, and a notch filter. So let's just listen to how filter 1 sounds, and I'm going to turn the cutoff all the way down, bring it up. Alright, so that's wide open right now. Now one thing I've noticed, and I just found this out today actually, if we turn that off, you can hear the difference. And I thought that it just meant that the filter wasn't opening all the way, like maybe some analog filters might not, but it was just that the key scale is set automatically to 12. So if we turn that down and turn the filter on, there's no difference. So let's just leave the filter with the key scale at 0. And then let's turn the resonance up halfway. I think that's 63 or 64. Okay, sorry about that. I don't actually know when the video stopped. Part of the problem with using DSLRs is that I only get 12 minutes of filming. I could probably fix that, but I'm too lazy right now. So let's just do this last filter sweep at with resonance all the way up. So I don't actually hear any stepping, which I think is a pretty nice thing in regards to filter sweeps. So we can change this to the low pass 24 decibel. And I'll do a filter sweep with the resonance at 0, midway, and 100%. I might not really be able to show you at 100% because I think it gets a bit too loud for the speakers, but I'll stop it if I think it's a bit too much. Yeah. I'll set the volume as low as I can. So let's add some envelope depth there, and so we're using the 12 dB filter, and I have resonance set to 90, and I can turn the cutoff way down. And we could set up a new sequencer line real quick. I'm going to go and just kind of, let's set the length to 8. And you hold the encoder down and then press the note that you want, and you can change the note length. So let's just, and we can change the resolution, change the length, you can also change the volume, kind of hard to hear with this sequence. And then you can start messing around with the cutoff. Resonance. Stuff like that. So I'm gonna initialize the patch again and show you one of the tricks I have, or not tricks per se, but something that I thought was pretty neat with this. You can have the waveforms. Okay, so we have that back to that. Going to set oscillator 1 and 2 on. I'm going to turn both of them all the way up to 100% and change the waveforms to 64 to match. One thing you can do is actually invert the waveform for oscillator 1, and you can change the phase for when at what point your waveform will start. So that's the phase. So let's turn them both to 1, and what you'll find is that you can't hear anything because the two waveforms are canceling each other out. And then you can start adding some fine tuning to get what sounds a bit like, to me, pulse width modulation. And you can speed that up. A little disharmonic. Okay, so apparently I'm having all sorts of problems with technology today. My computer decided to turn off while recording this. So anyway, let me just start over with, let's see. Okay, so we have just oscillator 1 at a sine wave, and oscillator 2 is also just a sine wave. And we're going to do some basic FM synthesis. It's actually PM synthesis, but that's similar to what the Yamaha DX7 used anyway. So it's pretty simple. You can have, if you're in oscillator 1, you can see on the screen printed out that you can have VCO2 and VCO3 modulate the oscillator. So let's just apply oscillator 2 to oscillator 1. So you can just turn it on and turn it off. And let's turn it all the way up and then modulate oscillator 2. We can change the tuning. And that's fine. One thing I like to do is, instead of having it on or off based on what I'm pressing or what I'm adding to the matrix here for parameters, I turn it all the way off, and then you can go into the mod matrix, and the way I did it was I pressed the VCA button and then velocity, and that takes me all the way to number 17. The new sources on here are a bit later, and so we're at the ones that you can define later. So let's go to ADSR 3, and you can go all the way over to VCO 1, and it's being modulated by 2. So you can't really hear anything, but if we're not using filters, you can actually use the envelopes of the filters to change the shape of how oscillator 2 is modulating oscillator 1. turn the phase on for both oscillator 1 and 2, the time when they are active. And you can change the coarse tuning of oscillator 2. So let's add a longer attack. You can also, on oscillator 1, turn the coarse tuning all the way down. There we go. So you turn the frequency offset all the way down. Kind of smooths out the sound. Maybe a little bit too much. So let's go back and change that back to what I had before. So I actually quite like making different sounds with FM synthesis on the accelerator. A little hard to come up with stuff out of, okay, so you can also have, oscillator 2 modulating both oscillator 1, 2, and 3. You can have oscillator 3 modulating oscillators 1, 2, and 3 as well. And so if they modulate themselves, you can get some more bizarre sounds out of it. So let's have oscillator 3 modulating oscillator 2. Oh, sorry. And then we can turn sync on with oscillator 1. And sync is actually variable, so you can actually have from 0 to 127. Well, I haven't even gotten into the mod matrix really, or LFOs, or the effects. Let's just load one of the bigger sets of effects I have. Okay, I think that's it for this tutorial or demonstration. Hopefully I can come up with something a bit later for you. Thanks.